Welcome to the hub where knowledge is key. Regal Learning Hub, the best you'll see. From math to science to history and more.
Hello and welcome to this tutorial. In this discussion, we shall be looking at the addition and subtraction of integers using the number line. Before we proceed, make sure you click on the subscribe button, like and share. Now let's look at the number line. The number line is a pictorial representation of numbers on a line arranged at equal intervals and in a definite order. Now you realize that the numbers on the screen are arranged at equal intervals. Thus, the number line also represents the relationship between the various numbers that it contains. To your right, the values of the numbers are always increasing, and then to your left, the numbers are reducing. Of course, you must be familiar with skip counting. Counting upwards and counting backwards. So normally, when we are adding, we count to our right. Then we are subtracting, and since our results will lead to values that are much lesser than those we started with, we normally count to our left. Let's look at our first example. Imagine we have 3 plus 5 to add. How can the number line be of assistance in solving this problem? Let's introduce the number line. Now from 3, indicated here with a dot, and since we are adding and there are 2 positive integers, what it simply means is that we are going to move to our right, since to our right are increasing values of the numbers, and then to our left are decreasing values of the numbers. So to your right, you realize that as you move, you increase the values. So we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on and so forth. So from 3, we are going to count the number of jumps at those definite intervals that will lead us to our answer. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. And then you realize that there are 5 jumps because we are adding 5. And then you realize that each jump stopped at the next number after the previous. Now where does that stop at, or where did we stop at when we're jumping? It's simply at 8. Thus 3 plus 5 is 8. This is one of the easiest ones. Let's move to the next question, probably which is more complicated. Now we have negative 6 plus 3. Let's introduce our number line, and now once again we are adding 3 to negative 6, and since we are adding a positive number to negative 6, that means we are going to also move to our right as well. And remember, you jump at the definite intervals that are shown on the number line. Don't jump and skip a number. That's what I mean. So from negative 6 we jump. So we have 1, 2, 3. And where is this arrow pointing at? Of course, it is pointing at the place containing the number negative 3. So therefore, negative 6 plus positive 3 is simply equal to negative 3. Let's go to our third example. We have 2 minus 5. Once again, let's introduce our number line. Now you realize that here we are subtracting, and what it simply means is that our result is going to be a decreased value. Which direction of the number line contains values that are decreasing? Of course, it is to our left. That means we are going to do our jumping towards the left at definite intervals, ensuring that we stop at the next number before the previous one until we arrive at the 5th count. From 2, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. Now I realize that we simply stopped at negative 3. So therefore, 2 minus 5 is simply equal to negative 3. Let's move to the third question. Here we have negative 2 minus 4. Let's introduce our number line again, and since we are subtracting 4 from negative 2, once again we are moving towards our left hand side. So from negative 2 that we have here, we simply count or jump 4 times towards our left. So from negative 2, we simply jump 4 times towards our left. Now we have 1, 2, 3, 4. And where did we stop at? We stopped at the place containing the number negative 6. So the result of this simple operation is going to be negative 6. Let's move to our next question. Look at this particular problem on the screen. We have negative 2 minus negative 4. This should not confuse you. This is simply the same as negative 2 plus 4. Why is that the case? Right outside this bracket, we have 1. And the negative 1 multiplied by negative 4 is simply positive 4. That is why we have plus 4 here. We shall be looking at more of this in future, and it shall become very clear once that is all explained. So looking at its simplified form here, what it will simply mean is that from negative 2 we jump 4 times towards our right on the number line. So let's introduce the number line. So from negative 2 we jump. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. And which number is the arrow pointing at? Of course, positive 2. Let's look at another way of doing it. Let's look at another way of looking at the number 5 we looked at earlier, which we solved earlier. We had negative 2 minus negative 4. Now, pay attention to this. Instead of writing it another way, we are just going to go straight forward by applying simple logic. So before then, let's introduce our number line. Now, since we have negative 2 minus negative 4, normally, since we are subtracting, as you can see here, we should have moved towards our left. But once you realize that the number in the bracket is negative, we do the opposite of what we should have done. What is the opposite of moving towards the left? Of course, moving towards the right. So in that case, we look at the negative 2 there and then move towards our right 4 times. So we have what? 1, 2, 3, and 4. And once again, realize that the answer is positive 2. Let's move to question number 6. Consider this problem on your screen. We have negative 2 plus negative 4. By convention, this is the same as negative 2 minus 4. How is that possible? By the same principle I spoke about earlier. Outside the bracket here is 1, which is normally not written. So positive 1 times negative 4 results to negative 4, as you can see here. And I said we'll soon be explaining multiplication of integers. There are different ways of looking at this problem. This particular question simply means that, let's say you are owing 2 Ghana cedis or $2 or 2 whatever, and then you go to add another debt of 4 cedis or $4 or whatever amount of money you are looking at. If you combine the two, what will you get? Of course, that is in your mind. This second part, you realize that we have negative 2, and then you are subtracting 4 from negative 2. What it simply means is that you are further depriving yourself of an additional 4. That will simply mean that you are also going to get the same answer as we talked about earlier. So, what will that give us? Before then, let's introduce our number line. Okay, we shall use this to explain it or to illustrate. So from negative 2, we move 4 times towards our left. So from negative 2, we have 1, 2, 3, and then 4. And which number is the arrow pointing at? And that is negative 6. Let's look at another alternative in dealing with this particular problem. Now we have negative 2 plus negative 4. Normally, whenever we are adding, what do? We move towards the right. But realize that the number in the bracket is what? It's negative. So anytime you have a negative number in the bracket, do the opposite of what you should have done relative to the sign you have there. So in this case, we are adding, but then the number is negative. So instead of moving towards our right, we do the opposite of what we should have done, which is we move towards the left. So let's introduce the number line once more. From negative 2, we have 1, 2, 3, and then 4. And which number is the arrow pointing at? Of course, negative 6. So you can see how easy it is. Now let's look at some important notes. Okay. Number 1. If A is an integer and then negative B is also another integer, so A plus negative B is simply the same as saying A minus B. So for example, if I have negative 2 minus 3 is the same as saying negative 2 plus negative 3. Okay, so you can look at it from the right to the left or from the left to the right. Is the same. Both sides are relatively saying the same thing. And then number 2, negative A minus negative B simply implies that negative A plus B. Anytime you have a negative and a negative meeting, right, like this, know that it becomes what? Positive. And this will all become very clear in our next discussion. So an example is, if you have negative 2 minus negative 3 is the same as saying negative 2 plus 3. Thank you so much for your time, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. This is Rega Learning Hub. See you again some other time. Goodbye.